Everyone assumes Hamilton's simulator criticism was just veteran frustration or a convenient excuse for Miami. The reality is far more damaging to Ferrari's 2026 championship hopes. He exposed a fundamental correlation failure where the driver and loop system actively misled him. It produced a car setup with massive mid-corner understeer he would never choose. This was not a driver failing to adapt to a new tool. It was a specific technical indictment of Maranello's virtual development platform. Hamilton stated plainly that the simulator really sends him the wrong direction. He wasn't venting about comfort or personal preference during that interview. He identified a systemic risk severe enough to abandon the tool entirely. He decided to cut it out rather than trust it again. But here is the tension hanging over the entire season. If the primary development tool gave misleading guidance on corner entry, what else is compromised? Can a team recover from a corrupted feedback loop while fighting a speed deficit? Fred Vasseur confirmed via Planet F1.com that they have a straight-line performance deficit. He admitted they must work on it, but offered no concrete solutions. That admission only covers the power unit side of the equation. It leaves the chassis correlation mystery completely unresolved for fans and analysts. You have to wonder how many qualifying sessions relied on phantom grip levels. Those theoretical advantages existed only in the virtual world before race day. Data doesn't lie, correlation does. Trust breaks fast. The SF26 carries an acknowledged straight-line deficit estimated at 30 HP versus Mercedes. Paddock reports cite this figure, though Ferrari hasn't confirmed it officially. Yet that number tells you nothing about Hamilton's specific handling complaints. He said the car didn't feel snappy entering corners after following simulator guidance. That complaint is the key unlocking the rest of this story. It suggests the problem isn't just raw horsepower or aero efficiency. Engineers cannot trust their own preparation tools when margins are thin. So where does that leave us regarding the factory-to-track disconnect? We must understand exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes first. The simulator issue is merely a symptom of a larger strategic gamble. Ferrari made that bet long before the 2026 cars turned a wheel. The Miami Grand Prix weekend serves as the definitive case study for this breakdown. Hamilton arrived at the circuit expecting a baseline setup derived from thousands of virtual laps. Instead, he found himself fighting a vehicle that refused to rotate properly through technical sections. He described the resulting configuration as having poor corner entry responsiveness alongside that persistent mid-corner understeer. This specific handling characteristic is notoriously difficult to drive around in a modern Formula One car. It forces the driver to compromise exit speed to manage entry stability. That trade-off destroys lap time accumulation over a race stint. Why would a world champion accept such a compromised starting point? The answer lies in the institutional weight placed on simulator validation. Engineers trust the model because it represents millions of dollars of investment. Drivers usually trust engineers because they possess the telemetry. Miami shattered that reciprocal confidence completely. Setup went sideways. Confidence evaporated instantly. Feedback loops failed. Hamilton realized during practice sessions that his real-world sensory input contradicted every pre-event prediction. The virtual model suggested more front wing or different suspension geometry would cure the balance issues. Real track testing proved those adjustments either ineffective or actively detrimental. This divergence between simulation and reality is what he meant by being sent in the wrong direction. It wasn't about the simulator feeling unrealistic in terms of force feedback or visual fidelity. It was about the engineering conclusions drawn from that data being fundamentally flawed for the SF26 chassis. Think about the cognitive load required to unlearn a prepared strategy mid-weekend. You have 45 minutes of practice to discard days of virtual preparation. Every setup change becomes a gamble rather than a calculated optimization. Hamilton noted that Shanghai felt ultra-encouraging precisely because he skipped simulator prep entirely. Suzuka left him on the back foot when he did use it. That pattern confirms the tool itself is the variable introducing error, not the driver's adaptation skills. Not the track surface evolution. The correlation model for the 2026 power unit and chassis combination appears broken in specific operating windows. Fred Vasseur's admission of a straight-line deficit masks this deeper correlation crisis. A horsepower gap can be measured on a dyno and addressed with hardware upgrades like ADUO. A correlation gap exists in the invisible space between software predictions and physical tire behavior. It cannot be fixed with a new turbocharger blade angle or revised fuel compound. So what happens when your primary development compass points south instead of north? You stop trusting the compass. Hamilton's decision to abandon the simulator wasn't a protest, it was a survival mechanism for preserving competitive form. He attended factory meetings to maintain communication channels while refusing to ingest potentially corrupting data inputs. That distinction matters enormously for understanding team dynamics. He remained engaged strategically while protecting his tactical preparation integrity. This separation of duties reveals how severe the trust deficit had become by mid-season. But why would Ferrari's correlation model be so fundamentally broken in the first place? The answer traces back to a strategic engineering bet made long before the SF26 ever touched asphalt. Technical analysis from Motor Biscuit reports that Maranello originally selected a smaller turbocharger specifically to minimize throttle lag during standing starts. Under previous regulations, that design choice offered tangible tactical advantages off the line. Then the FIA introduced a new 5-second pre-start procedure for 2026. That regulatory shift completely eliminated the benefit the smaller turbo was designed to deliver. Strategy failed silently. Regulations shifted unexpectedly. Penalties remained permanently. The straight-line performance cost of that undersized component stayed locked into the power unit architecture while the offsetting advantage vanished overnight. This is the causal chain that explains the estimated 30 HP deficit versus Mercedes cited in paddock reports. Remember, that figure comes from external estimates rather than official Ferrari disclosures. Fred Vasseur confirmed the deficit exists on record via Planet F1. Calm without specifying magnitude, he stated simply that they know about it and must work on it. But acknowledging a problem differs enormously from having already solved it. The 2026 power unit splits output roughly evenly between combustion and electric deployment. That balance means raw horsepower numbers only tell part of the story, Hamilton himself noted via Planet F1. Calm that Mercedes takes a huge step on straights due to superior deployment strategies. Rivals have more deployment available and experience less derating at the end of straights, so the 30 HP gap isn't just about peak combustion output. It's compounded by how efficiently that energy gets deployed when drivers need it most. Designing an entire engine philosophy around optimizing one specific moment that no longer exists in the rulebook represents a catastrophic strategic miscalculation. You've committed manufacturing resources, testing budgets, and development timelines to a concept rendered obsolete by administrative fiat. The smaller turbo can't spin fast enough to maintain optimal boost pressure at top speed. Energy recovery systems work harder to compensate, draining batteries faster. Drivers face derating earlier on straights while competitors pull away. This explains why power-sensitive circuits like Monza, Spa-Francorchamps, Silverstone, and Albert Park are flagged as particular liabilities. Those tracks demand sustained high-speed running where the turbo-sizing penalty compounds relentlessly. Ferrari's genuine chassis strength becomes irrelevant when you're bleeding tenths per lap on every straight. The SF26 reportedly possesses one of the strongest cornering packages on the grid according to multiple outlets. Yet that advantage gets neutralized by a power unit compromise that no amount of aerodynamic refinement can fully mask. This brings us back to Hamilton's simulator complaints with fresh context. If the underlying power unit behavior doesn't match virtual models because the turbo operates outside its intended map, then correlation failures become inevitable. The simulator was likely modeling expected turbo response based on original design parameters. Real-world behavior diverged because those parameters no longer applied under new procedures. Engineers chasing phantom solutions were actually victims of an outdated foundational assumption. So where does that leave us regarding the driver's daily preparation routine? Hamilton made the radical decision to stop using the simulator entirely between races. He skipped preparatory sessions before the Canadian Grand Prix as a direct consequence of the Miami experience. Ahead of Monaco, he stated via Planet F1, "Calm that returning carried too many risks." That phrase carries enormous weight coming from a 7-time world champion. It signals that the potential damage to his real-world performance outweighed any theoretical benefit of virtual track familiarization. Most drivers treat simulator time as essential homework, regardless of correlation quality. Abandoning it completely represents an unprecedented vote of no confidence in factory infrastructure. Risk outweighs reward. Instinct beats data. Preparation changed forever. This wasn't a temporary pause for recalibration or software updates. it was a fundamental restructuring of how a Ferrari driver prepares for race weekends throughout the 2026 season. Hamilton continued attending factory meetings to maintain strategic alignment with engineers. He simply refused to ingest setup data that had proven unreliable during actual competition. That distinction reveals sophisticated risk management rather than simple frustration. He preserved communication channels while protecting his sensory calibration from corruption. Think about the discipline required to walk away from a tool everyone else still uses. Teammates and rivals continue grinding virtual laps hoping for marginal gains. Hamilton bet everything on his ability to extract maximum performance through real-world feedback alone. Shanghai became ultra-encouraging precisely because he entered that weekend without simulator-derived expectations clouding his judgment. Suzuka left him on the back foot when he did rely on virtual preparation earlier in the year. Those contrasting results validated his controversial decision empirically. But this approach creates its own vulnerabilities. You lose the ability to test new components virtually before committing them to physical manufacturing. Development cycles slow when your most experienced driver won't validate upgrades in simulation. Engineers lose a critical feedback channel for understanding tire behavior under varying conditions. The ADUO program targeting power recovery depends heavily on virtual testing to optimize deployment strategies. How do you validate or redesign turbocharger's effectiveness if your primary test pilot refuses to drive it virtually? This tension between necessary development work and justified driver skepticism defines Ferrari's current operational reality. Hamilton's maiden victory at Barcelona proved his instinct-first approach could deliver results despite these constraints. Yet sustaining championship competitiveness requires resolving the underlying correlation issues eventually. You cannot win titles indefinitely by outdriving your own development tools. The simulator complaint exposed a systemic vulnerability that extends far beyond one driver's personal preferences. It revealed how regulatory changes can cascade through engineering decisions, corrupting feedback loops and forcing competitors to choose between trusting flawed systems or abandoning them entirely. Ferrari's response to the power deficit is a two-phase engine recovery program called ADUO. Phase 1, deployed before Austria, combined revised turbocharger components with a new shell fuel compound. Estimates suggest a 7 to 8 horsepower gain. Phase 2, scheduled for Monza, introduces redesigned compressor blades and thermal-resistant materials. The combined target is 30 horsepower recovered. The previous section covered simulator correlation failures, but the underlying cause was also strategic. Ferrari initially selected a smaller turbine to reduce throttle lag at the start. That decision itself was based on prior season regulations. New race procedures changed the energy deployment window, meaning the same component now operates outside its original efficiency range. Hamilton mentioned in his own words via Planet F1.com that rivals deploy more energy at the end of straights while Ferrari drivers experience less output when they need it most. So the 30 horsepower recovery number isn't just about adding back lost power, it's also about matching the existing system architecture to the current rule set. One phase adds combustion output. Another adjusts how energy is redistributed. Both phases are sequential, but the timeline between them creates a gap where reliability testing occurs without full-scale validation.